There is a man walking around Hong Kong right now who could buy a fleet of yachts, a private island, and never work another day in his life. Instead, you might find him riding the subway in a plain jacket, chatting with strangers, or picking up a bowl of noodles from a street vendor. His name is Chow Yun-fat, and for decades, he has been one of the highest-paid actors to come out of Asia. Yet, almost everything about the way he lives contradicts what we expect from a man of his fortune. He doesn't own a mansion filled with staff. He doesn't collect sports cars. By his own account, he gets by on a few $100s a month in personal spending. So, how does someone worth hundreds of millions of dollars end up living like this? The answer says a lot about who he is, and it starts long before he ever stepped in front of a camera. Chow Yun-fat was born in 1955 on Lam Island, a small, quiet piece of land off the coast of Hong Kong that, at the time, had no roads for cars and barely any modern conveniences. His family were farmers, and life revolved around labor rather than leisure. There was no electricity in the home where he grew up, which meant no television, no easy nights, and certainly no glimpse of the glamorous life that would eventually find him. As a boy, his mornings began early, tending to animals before school, and his afternoons often ended with him helping his mother sell homemade snacks at the local market instead of playing with friends. It was a childhood defined by responsibility, not indulgence, and that distinction would shape the rest of his life. When Chow was a teenager, his family relocated to Hong Kong itself, hoping the city would offer more opportunity than the island had. Instead, they found a different kind of hardship. Urban life came with rent, bills, and constant financial pressure, and there were stretches where the family struggled just to keep a roof over their heads. By the time he was 17, Chow made the difficult decision to leave school altogether so he could contribute to the household income. Over the following months, he cycled through a string of odd jobs. He worked as a cleaner, sold cameras, drove a taxi, waited tables, and delivered packages across the city. None of these jobs pointed toward a future in entertainment. If anything, they looked like the beginning of an ordinary, unremarkable life. But an unexpected opportunity was about to change everything. In the early 1970s, Hong Kong's television network TVB opened auditions for new talent, and it didn't matter whether applicants had any acting background. Chow, then still a teenager with no formal training, decided to try his luck. Against long odds, he was chosen. The role he landed was minor, but the paycheck was steady, and more importantly, it opened a door he hadn't known existed. Recognizing that this could be a real path forward, he enrolled in acting classes to sharpen skills he'd never had the chance to develop. Within a few years, he had signed with one of Hong Kong's major film studios, and by the mid-1970s, he was a familiar face in local television dramas. Television success, however, didn't immediately translate into movie stardom. For years, Chow bounced between minor roles, building a reputation as a dependable, versatile performer without necessarily being a headline name. That changed in the mid-1980s when he was cast in a gritty crime drama that would become a defining film of Hong Kong cinema. The movie was an enormous hit, and it turned Chow into a genuine box office draw almost overnight. He went on to headline a string of action and crime thrillers throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s, often collaborating with some of the era's most influential directors. These films didn't just make him famous in Hong Kong, they helped define an entire genre of stylish, emotionally charged action cinema that influenced filmmakers around the world for decades afterward. By the mid-1990s, several of Chow's collaborators had already made the leap to Hollywood, and he decided to follow. Before making the jump, he spent a couple of years focused on improving his English and adapting his craft for an international audience, a patient and deliberate approach that reflected the same work ethic instilled in him during his childhood. His American debut came in the late 1990s in an action thriller where he played a hired assassin, and it introduced him to a much wider audience outside Asia. From there, his career took an interesting turn. He starred in a historical drama opposite a major Hollywood actress, playing a king navigating cultural change, a role that showcased a different, more dramatic side of his talent. Not long after, he appeared in a martial arts epic directed by an acclaimed filmmaker, a film that went on to win multiple prestigious international awards and became one of the most celebrated foreign-language films in cinema history. What makes this especially remarkable is that Chow had no formal martial arts training at all. Everything audiences saw on screen was the product of skilled choreography, patient coaching from stunt professionals, and his own dedication to getting every movement right. He has been candid in interviews about relying heavily on his stunt team rather than any natural athletic background, a rare bit of humility from a man capable of convincing millions of viewers that he was a lifelong warrior. He continued expanding his range over the following years, appearing in fantasy adventures and later, a major blockbuster pirate franchise, cementing his status as one of the most recognizable Asian actors working internationally. Filming action sequences wasn't without risk. He has spoken about accidents on set, including being struck during a fight scene and a dangerously close call while shooting an intense action sequence early in his career. These moments were reminders that behind the polished final cut of any film lies real physical danger that actors quietly accept as part of the job. By the 2010s, Chow had appeared in more than 100 films and had firmly established himself as one of the highest-earning actors to come out of Hong Kong. His accumulated wealth eventually reached the hundreds of millions of dollars. In a twist that must have felt meaningful given how his story began, he was awarded an honorary doctorate from a university in Hong Kong decades after leaving school as a teenager to help support his family. The boy who once had no time to study because he had to feed animals and sell snacks at the market grew into a man recognized formally for his contributions to society and the arts. Given everything Chow has achieved, most people would expect his lifestyle to reflect his success. Instead, the opposite has become one of the most talked about aspects of his public image. Reports from those close to him, including his wife, describe a man who prefers eating at local street food stalls over fine dining, who shops sparingly, and who once used the same basic mobile phone for well over a decade before finally switching to a smartphone only because the old device stopped functioning. He has reportedly been spotted waiting in line to buy tickets for his own films, blending in with regular moviegoers rather than expecting special treatment. There was a period earlier in his life when he did enjoy collecting vintage cars, a fairly typical indulgence for someone in his position. Eventually, though, he sold the entire collection. When asked why, he explained with characteristic humor that he already felt like an antique himself, joking that he was breaking down often enough without needing an old car to match. Rather than being driven around by a private chauffeur, he's known for taking public transportation, and it's not unusual for commuters to recognize him on the subway. Far from avoiding attention, he's known for happily stopping to take photos with fans who spot him, treating these encounters as pleasant rather than intrusive. Interestingly, photography turned out to be a genuine talent of his, separate from acting entirely. In the late 1990s, without telling anyone, his sister submitted a few of his photographs to a competition at a gallery in Hong Kong under a different name. He was stunned to learn that one of them placed in the top 3. Years later, he released a book collecting photographs he had taken behind the scenes on various film sets, and the proceeds were donated to support victims of a devastating earthquake in China. It was published through a well-known luxury fashion house and distributed in stores across Paris and Hong Kong. A small but telling detail, even when connected to luxury, his instinct was to direct the benefits toward people in need rather than personal gain. When asked why he prefers public transit and modest routines over the trappings typically associated with wealth, Chow has explained that he sees a kind of social pressure at play among the wealthy, an unspoken expectation that money must be displayed through possessions or else people will view you as strange. He has pushed back against that idea, saying he'd rather move through the city quickly and comfortably than sit in traffic surrounded by symbols of status. Given that Hong Kong is one of the most expensive cities in the world, with a level of wealth inequality that rivals or exceeds cities like Singapore and New York, his rejection of typical status symbols stands out even more starkly. He has described his approach to happiness in fairly simple terms, that bringing a moment of joy to another person is itself a kind of reward, and that the world already has enough unhappiness without adding to it through vanity or excess. He avoids designer clothing almost entirely, reserving formal, expensive attire only for events like red carpet premieres where a dress code is unavoidable. Otherwise, he's known to wear second-hand clothing and inexpensive sandals that reportedly cost less than the price of a casual lunch. His reasoning is straightforward. Comfort matters more to him than impressing anyone else. Physical fitness has also remained a consistent part of his routine well into his late 60s, largely through daily jogging and hiking. He has spoken about how running, something he initially found tedious, eventually taught him patience and discipline that extended well beyond exercise. According to him, the habit strengthened not just his body but his mindset, helping him push through difficulty in other areas of life. In interviews discussing his monthly expenses, he has mentioned living on only a few $100s a month, an almost unbelievable figure for someone whose net worth runs into the hundreds of millions. For Chow, true contentment isn't rooted in accumulating things, but in maintaining a peaceful state of mind, something he has said is far harder to achieve than making money in the first place. To understand why Chow lives the way he does, it helps to look at the personal history behind the public image. Before he found lasting stability, his romantic life went through several difficult chapters. An early relationship with a fellow actress ended after a brief, troubled marriage that lasted less than a year. A subsequent relationship with another actress lasted several years before ending, reportedly due to family disapproval that Chow felt he couldn't ignore. These setbacks left him disillusioned about romance for a period of time. That changed in the mid-1980s when he met Jasmine Tan, a woman from a well-off family in Singapore, at a point in his career before he had reached major stardom. Their relationship developed into marriage, and the couple hoped to build a family together. That hope was shattered in the early 1990s when they lost a child during pregnancy, a loss that devastated them both. While Chow has said he processed his grief relatively quickly, believing it wasn't productive for both parents to remain consumed by sorrow, his wife's healing took considerably longer, reportedly spanning several years. Throughout that period, he encouraged her to stay active through hiking and exercise as a way of coping, an approach that mirrors his broader philosophy that movement and discipline can help carry a person through hardship. Even in moments of his own grief, this pattern held. Following the death of his mother, he was seen out hiking with friends just a day after her funeral, choosing to lean into routine and physical activity rather than withdraw entirely. After the loss of their daughter, he and Jasmine ultimately decided not to try again for children, a decision made more difficult by additional health complications she faced. It was a profound disappointment for two people who had once envisioned a large family, but rather than letting that loss define them bitterly, they redirected their energy elsewhere. Unable to build the family they had hoped for, Chow and Jasmine chose to pour themselves into helping others instead. Together, they established a charitable foundation aimed at supporting people facing hardship and addressing broader social inequities, something that likely drew on Chow's own memories of growing up without electricity or financial security. The proceeds from his photography book, mentioned earlier, went directly to earthquake relief efforts in China, just one example among many charitable contributions he has made over the years. Perhaps the most striking commitment he has made publicly is his intention to donate the overwhelming majority of his fortune to charitable causes after his death, a pledge he has repeated in multiple interviews across Asia. When discussing this decision, he has spoken with characteristic self-deprecating humor, joking that the choice was really driven by his wife, whom he half-jokingly refers to as his manager, rather than his own initiative. Beneath the humor, though, is a sincere philosophy that wealth accumulated in a single lifetime isn't something to be hoarded, and that it can do far more good circulating back into society than sitting untouched. Now, in his late 60s, Chow has also spoken openly about aging itself, an area where many public figures feel pressure to intervene cosmetically. He has dismissed the idea of chasing a youthful appearance through surgery, saying he's comfortable growing older naturally, and even embraces the idea of eventually playing older character roles as his own age advances. Rather than fearing the process, he describes having become more at peace with it over time, framing death and aging as simply a natural, unavoidable part of life rather than something to resist. He's also spoken candidly about mistakes, suggesting that everyone makes them regularly, and that what actually matters is the scale of the mistake and how a person chooses to respond to it. Though his output in front of the camera has slowed in recent years, Chow has given no indication that he plans to fully retire from acting, a craft he has said he still genuinely enjoys. What remains constant is his broader outlook, that the wealth he's built over a 5-decade career was never truly his to keep, and that his responsibility now is to make sure it eventually finds its way back to the people who need it most. It would be easy to look at Chow Yun-fat's story and assume his modest habits are simply eccentric quirks of a famous person trying to seem relatable. But taken together, from the second-hand clothing to the subway rides to the pledge to give away the vast majority of his fortune, a clearer picture emerges. This is a man shaped early by scarcity who never fully let go of the values that scarcity taught him, even after fame and money made a very different lifestyle possible. For Chow, comfort was never about luxury. It was about peace of mind, family, and the ability to help someone else have a slightly better day. So the next time you imagine what you do with hundreds of millions of dollars, it's worth considering his answer to that same question. He didn't buy a private jet. He didn't build a mansion. He kept living largely the way he always had, and chose instead to let his fortune quietly change other people's lives long after his own career finally winds down.